member. It's really cool. All right, so our next session, did I say zombie?
What?
Pentest Apocalypse.
Yeah. Do I need to check it? Do I need to check it at all? Sure.
Make sure it's on. It's telling you guys recording, so you can't walk around. You want to be on the house.
Okay. Perfect. I'll just use the mic. Awesome.
It's really cool, but this one's going to give you a different spin on it, right? So, as it suggests, Pentest Apocalypse. So let me tell you about our next speaker a little bit. His name is Beau Bullock, and Beau is a security analyst for Black Hills Information Security. Prior to joining Black Hills, Beau's primary role had been implementing security controls to protect information and network assets. At Black Hills, Beau performed a variety of security consulting services. He's also held information security positions in financial industry and the health industry. Beau has experience with all aspects of enterprise network security, including penetration testing, vulnerability assessment, data loss prevention, wireless security, firewall management, physical security, and employee security training. Very important stuff there. Beau holds a BS in information security technology and has obtained multiple industry certifications, include OSCP, OSWP, GCIH, GCFA, GSEC, and GPEN. Beau's presentation today is entitled Pentest Apocalypse. No, that zombie apocalypse is way cooler. And it will discuss how to prepare for and avoid the Pentest apocalypse by describing common vulnerabilities found on many assessments. By the way, before we'll jump up here, if you could grab your pen and write this down, you could follow Beau on Twitter. It's DAFTHAC, D-A-F-T, hack, D-A-F-T-H-A-C. That's his handle. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Beau Bullock.
Thanks, Warwick. So it's been an awesome day. I don't know if you guys have been in some of the awesome talks that I have, but every talk I've been to today has been awesome. And I just want to say, if you get a chance to thank one of these guys that is a staff member here at BSides today, do it, because they're doing a fantastic job. So let's talk about some doomsday prepping. Pentest Apocalypse. That's when you hire a pen tester and they come in and they just walk all over your network. You put in the time and effort to develop these security policies and these programs that cover every aspect that you could imagine. You feel like you've got just this epic security onion that's protecting your network. But you hire the pen tester, they come in, and within a few hours they've gotten DA on your network. So my goal today is to describe a lot of the things that I've done in Pentest that have allowed me to escalate really quickly in an environment and stay undetected. It's been way too easy to just escalate in an environment. So who am I? I am Beau Bullock. I'm a pen tester at Black Hills InfoSec. I previously was an enterprise defender. I know how hard it is to implement a lot of these things I'm going to talk about today, but they're things that need to be done, and not enough people are doing them. Most of the things I'm going to talk about today are items that you probably won't find with a vulnerability scanner. There's ways in which an attacker can just utilize tools that are built into your network and completely stay under the radar and find quick paths to escalate in the environment. I play guitar, I'm an audio engineer, I'm a home brewer, and my wife thinks I have way too many hobbies. So the reason I'm doing this talk, like I said, it's just privilege escalation's been easy. I want to provide a list of 10 things that I do on a daily basis during tests, and things that they're important that most organizations that I come to and do tests for some reason, they don't know about these things. But I'm also going to talk about some very common things as well. Because, I mean, you can run a vulnerability scanner and find, you know, that all your patches are in place and you're doing just fine, right? But what about, you know, group policy preference files out on the network? Have you checked those? Because, you know, there's other reasons too, like who needs a 0-day when your employees just put clear text credentials or administrative credentials in a file out on a share that every user in the network has access to. I'm going to discuss something that's discussed in many pen testing talks. What is the difference between a pen test and a vulnerability assessment? These two items are used interchangeably in almost every talk that I see on pen testing, and it's something that not enough people are getting, that they're two very different things. So, a vulnerability assessment. Generally, they're broader in scope. There's not a goal of just, I want to get access to PCI data, or I want to get PHI. It's more along the lines of, hey, here's all my /16 subnets. I want you to tell me every vulnerability I have in the amount of time that you have to work on it. Whereas, you know, if we start to move into talking about an actual pen test, it's very goal-driven. How do I stop the interview from coming out? So I want to know, when I go to an organization to do a pen test, generally I'll ask, what is the most valuable thing that you have that you wouldn't want an attacker to gain access to? And most of the time it's, I have PCI data, or I have, you know, PHI data, or, you know, my SCADA environment's really important because it would, you know, turn off all the power for my state. And then those are the items that we go for. It's not just vulnerability scan the environment and tell you that you have, you know, 200 missing patches. It's, let me find the quickest way to gain access to that data without causing a lot of alarms to go up, without throwing any red flags. And it's a really good test against your actual posture against an advanced attacker. Whereas, you know, if you have a vulnerability assessment and somebody just launches a vulnerability scanner in your network, that's not really that doesn't really indicate what a normal attacker would do. For the most part, attackers are very sneaky. They try to stay under the radar. And so a penetration test will really help you find out if you could potentially stop somebody like that. So let's talk about some of the common issues that I am seeing on tests. These are the 10 things that I'm going to talk about today. Some of them you've definitely seen before, at least I'd hope you have, like patching. If today's the first day you're hearing that you should patch your systems, and I'm sorry to be the one to tell you guys. But we're going to talk about a few other things too that I've done on multiple tests that organizations didn't know about, and they're very important things. So let's talk about patches first. Patches are important because if you do not patch your system, somebody is going to exploit them. And you know, generally, this is going to be like the last thing I'm going to look for on a test because it's very noisy to find these things. If you vulnerability scan a network, you're going to throw some red flags up. So generally, like this would be along the lines of like really number 10 of what I would even try on a test because of just how hard it is to typically just find these on every system. I mean, there are tools out there that will just look for things like 08067, and it'll just go to every system and say, hey, do you have 08067? But it's still kind of noisy. But it's one of those things that if I'm going to talk about pen testing or security, I have to mention patching. But patches won't fix everything. A great example of this is group policy preferences. I love this vulnerability as a pen tester. Most organizations don't love this vulnerability. So what are group policy preferences? They are extensions of GPO. They help to create settings for certain items on workstations, such as creating local administrator users. So if you, as an organization, want to make sure that anytime you plug a workstation in the domain, it gets a specific local administrator account. It's going to go, you add it to the domain. It's going to go out to GPO and say, hey, what are all the settings I need? Oh, you need this specific local admin username and password. Good to go. So that's cool. That's an awesome way to just automate having a local admin. But in May of this year, Microsoft was like, hey guys, that's really cool. You're adding administrative users with GPP, but the files or the passwords that you're setting for those users are in a file that's located in a share that's pretty much accessible by anyone on your network. They're encrypted. Don't get me wrong, they're encrypted, but yeah, the key that actually encrypts them is publicly available to everyone. So anyone can decrypt them. It's great. So what does the patch actually, there was a patch they released in May. What does the patch actually do? It basically says you can no longer create administrative accounts using GPP. What about all the old ones? They don't just get deleted because that would stop your business. I mean, you don't want to just kill off your process for creating a local admin on a system. But I mean, most people are like, oh, I've vulnerability scanned my environment. I see that I don't have any missing patches, but yet there's like 80% of the environments that I test have a freaking local admin password globally available to everyone on the domain just out there because the box says you're green, So you actually have to go in and manually delete these accounts and the files. So to be quite honest, it is the first thing I check for on an assessment just because it's easy to find. It's really easy. You just literally, I'm going to show you 3 tools here. You can use PowerShell, PowerSploit, which is awesome. And it just literally just import the module into PowerShell, run get GPP password. It's going to go out to the domain controller, say, hey, you got any files out in sysvol that have C password in it? Cool, give me all those. I'm going to decrypt them for you. Metasploit has a module tool that does that. Basically just set your session in Metasploit and run it. And my personal favorite is just running a find string command from the command line. Find string, C password, go out to my logon server in sysvol, and look at all the XML files for the string C password. It'll come back with a nice little blurb of that entire XML file, and you can then go take that C password value, which, sorry, I actually didn't talk about it. It's right there. This one here at the bottom. It looks like that. It's an encrypted value, and you just use it with a tool that can decrypt it, like get GPP password, or there's a nice Ruby script out there that can do it too. And most of the time, we'll have been on the network as a non-admin user for like 10 seconds, and now I have a local admin at least. Sometimes people put domain admins out there. So that brings us to our next point. Widespread local administrator accounts. So now that I have a local admin account that I got from GPP or wherever, if you utilize that same account across every workstation in your environment, it makes it so easy to pivot around. It makes it so easy for an attacker just to basically act as a domain admin. Using the exact same credentials makes it really hard, or makes it really easy to just completely compromise an environment. So something like I typically just use like the SMB login module from Metasploit to just test. I'm going to test like the 5 IPs that are in my range that I'm at to see if it has the same local admin user and password. And the beauty about that is if it does, we go domain admin hunting now. So how do you go domain admin hunting? I typically use a tool like Joeware NetSys or Veil PowerView User Hunter. These tools, they're just like, well, Veil PowerView is a PowerShell script that will go ask who's in the domain admins group and then go to every system on your network and say, hey, do you have a session from this domain admin on your system right now? No? Okay, let me go to the next one. No, do you have a session from this domain admin on your system right now? Cool, you do. Awesome. Let's go pivot to that system using the local admin password, local admin credential, and just dump the creds from memory. And we've literally escalated domain admin in less than an hour. That's very typical. That happens a lot. The other thing about having just a normal global local administrator is you don't even need the clear text password. Let's say we didn't even get the clear text password from GPP. We just had an administrative user that could dump the hashes from the system. We can use that hash to just pass the hash. I'm sure everyone in the room has heard about pass the hash. Windows accepts the hash as authentication. It's awesome. So passwords. I'm sure you've all heard that you shouldn't leave admin or admin password, tomcat before. So I'm not going to talk about changing passwords, but it's something we see a lot. I mean, we see it on network devices specifically a lot. People just deploy switches or deploy routers and don't change the interface, the admin logon to them. If you haven't heard of PwnList before, this is something we use a lot, and I love PwnList. PwnList is a site that collects various data from all the breaches that get dumped out to the internet. So anytime you hear something like the Stratfor hack or LinkedIn got hacked and 5 million credentials got stolen, that information typically gets dumped somewhere on the internet. Maybe it's like Payspin or one of the darker hacker sites. Well, PwnList is watching all those for any time those come through and adding them to a nice database that you can go search. So if you want to know if your email address was part of a breach ever, go to pwnlist.com, give them your email address, and they'll tell you, yeah, you were pwned on August of 2011. But what's really cool is when you pay for the API, you can throw an entire domain against PwnList. So you can say, hey, I want to know if anyone at blackhillsinfosec.com has been pwned. And then they'll come back, oh yeah, by the way, there's 300 accounts that were pwned. Here's all the credentials for them. Sweet. So if we get that level of data in our reconnaissance phase before we ever start a pen test, sometimes we have credentials to log into the network before the test even starts. So we talk to the customer and they're like, okay, we're ready for you to pen test us. All right, we're in. Cool. So I always recommend that customers check PwnList. Just look to see if your employees are using their corporate email addresses for random websites and getting pwned. Because a lot of people reuse passwords, and it's a really bad thing. Default 8-character password policies. I'm pretty sure there's somebody in the room that has a default 8-character password policy on their network, because it happens a lot. People don't want to move to 12 or 14 characters. So let me introduce you to my friend password spraying. So what is password spraying? When you think about trying to brute force an account on a Windows workstation, you're going to get locked out pretty quickly because most organizations have something like 3 failed login attempts, 5 failed login attempts, and then you're locked out. So how do you actually go about brute forcing any specific user account? Well, what you do is you basically say, all right, my threshold is 5 login attempts. I'm going to try 3 or 4. I always try 3 because I try to give a little leeway for the user, just in case they happen to mistype their password so they don't get locked out. But you take like 3 good passwords, like something like password123 or company name 123. And we're going to try those 3 passwords against every account on the domain. And let's say you have 10,000 users. I might generate 30,000 failed login attempts, but I'm not going to lock out anyone on the domain. And you know what? Somebody on your domain has a password of your company name 123. And this is just a little script. It's just a little Windows command line script. You can run this right here, and you just basically create a little users.txt file that contains your user list and a little pass.txt file. It contains your passwords that is less than your total or your lockout threshold, because you don't want to just lock out everyone in your environment. So be careful if you do try to run this. And you'll end up with something like this. This is actual data. This is a password spray I did where you can see there was like 40 different accounts I sprayed with one attempt with passwords like password1, password123, company name 123. And I'm pretty sure one of these was a domain admin. So, I mean, what do? You increase password length. Don't make ridiculous policies. I mean, the truth behind it is you need to just train your users to use longer passwords. Don't use your company name in the password. Don't use password in your password. Check PwnList. Password spray your users. The other good thing about password spraying your own users internally is you're gonna get to learn about your own detection mechanisms. Because if I'm causing 30,000 failed login attempts within an hour's time, somebody should see that somewhere. There should be a red flag. So overprivileged users. Are your standard users already admins? If so, that's a bad thing. It's really bad. Make sure that you only grant administrative access where necessary. You know, I've done a few tests where organizations are like, yeah, all our users are actually local admins already. Sorry, but that's the way it is. I'm like, really? Sweet. Let's go. Let's do the test. All right, done. No, it's not done that quick, but it's one of those things where I get excited, but it's bad for the customer. It's really bad. So I mean, this is just a quick blurb about just if you have to give administrative access, make sure it's restricted to only those who need it. I mean, there's no reason your standard domain users need administrative access. You should have techs, IT teams that can help install whatever software they need. And this brings us to our next point. Overprivileged users on other systems. So not too many people look for this one. So what I mean by on other systems is, I'm not an admin on my system. I'm not an admin on my neighbor's system. But somewhere on my network, there's some group that I'm a member of, and that group happens to be an administrator of this one system. So really, there's not that many people looking for this specific thing. So just let me give you a scenario. Unprivileged user, just a normal guy from accounting or HR or whatever, decides he wants to install this awesome software on their system. They call it the help desk. Help desk is like, okay, cool, let's help. Let's do it. Let's try installing it. Run as admin, it's not installing, something's not working, got to install a driver, it's just not working. Let's just try to add domain users group to local administrators. That'll work. And for some reason, they leave it there. It didn't work, but they leave it there anyway. That means every domain user is now an administrator of that system, whoever's in that domain users group. So while, as a pen tester or an attacker, you give me access, or I gain access to your network, and I'm not an administrative user, if I can find that one system on your network where I'm an admin, you're going to have a bad day. So there's really easy ways to do that, too. My favorite tool right now is Beau PowerView. I love PowerView. It's a PowerShell script that does a lot of things, but a couple of things that I'm going to talk about is it'll find local admin access on the network by running one command. My next favorite command is invoke ShareFinder. ShareFinder does what User Hunter does, in that it will go out to every system on your network and say, hey, what open shares do I have access to? Oh, I have access to the C drive on this system. I have access to backups on this server. I have access to whatever. And create you a nice list that you can say, hey, I have access to all these awesome shares on a network. If I see admin dollar in that list, money. But the real power with ShareFinder comes into what I'm about to talk about next. When we talk about what information can you learn from just the users on the network. So previously we've talked about doing kind of like active testing. Like we've tried password spraying, we tried looking to GPP to try to grab clear text passwords. But what can we just learn from users in the environment? So using ShareFinder to generate that list, that awesome list of shares, now we can take that and use it with FileFinder. It's just another module built into Beau PowerView. FileFinder will take that list and go out to every one of those shares and look for files on the network that include specific terms that you want to look for. By default, it looks for things like pass, admin, logon, credentials, and any files that have that in their title. It'll create you this awesome CSV that has all these things. And you can just go through it, and you'll find things like passwordlist.doc. And like this specific file I'm showing here, it's like, here's my network logon, here's my LinkedIn account, here's my HR logon. And it's just amazing that users just put this stuff out on shares that you have access to. The other powerful thing you can do with FileFinder is give it terms. So look for specific things that you're interested in. Look for SCADA, look for HR data, look for PCI info, credit card numbers, that kind of thing. But it's just amazing what users just put out there for you, for an attacker to just go get. And I mean, this is, in my opinion, a pretty easy way to just find this, is just run this script. It's literally just a PowerShell script. Go run it and see what comes up on your network before your next pen test. Information disclosure on intranet sites. So I'm talking about things like SharePoint. If you have like a global, or you have a centralized location where most of your users are storing a lot of sensitive data, which, I mean, it's not supposed to be sensitive. It's supposed to be used for, helpful things like how-to documents and collaborating, and maybe you might put emails and help desk tickets out there. But all that information is really important for an attacker, too. We just use the built-in search functionality in SharePoint. Just go to the little search box and type in SCADA how-to. Sweet, you give me like all the steps I need and the IP addresses, and then there's like an email conversation between an automation engineer on how to connect to this SCADA environment using certain passwords. It's great. I mean, just learning stuff from the users on the network. I mean, it's not like elite hacking or anything. It's just searching the network for things you want. NetBIOS and LLM&R poisoning. This is something that's definitely common. It's very common because it's not the easiest thing to fix, but it's something that you can do with group policy. But I love this little screenshot here of the description of what NetBIOS and LLM&R poisoning is. Basically, LLM&R and NetBIOS, they act as a failsafe for DNS. So if I'm searching for something like print server, but I happen to mistype it, first, it's going to go out to the DNS server. The DNS server is going to say, you were looking for Pint server. I have no idea where that is. Sorry. Goes back to the laptop. Laptop now uses NetBIOS and LLM&R to communicate to local hosts on the network to say, hey, do you guys know where this Pint server is? And if you're an attacker, you can sit on that LAN and listen for those types of requests. And you can answer them. You can say, hey, I'm Pint server. I'm right here. Come connect to me. And when somebody connects to you, you can obtain their NTLM hash. It's awesome. All I have to do is be plugged into the network and just listen for people who are mistyping things, and I can gain password hashes. But it's something you can turn off with checkboxes. There's literally a checkbox in GPO to turn off LLM&R. There's a script that you can push out with GPO to turn off NetBIOS. Because, I mean, is it really that necessary for your hosts on your network to be querying each other for where information is? I'm sure there is some reason, but I mean, really, your DNS server should be answering the majority of the requests that are valid. And the tool Spider Labs Responder is a really great tool for doing this. It's a tool you'd have to, you run from Linux. There is a Windows tool too, but it's kind of not as good as Responder. The last common item I'm going to talk about is local workstation privilege escalation. So the other items we've talked about have all been going out to the network and searching for things that would allow us to elevate our privileges within an environment. If none of those worked out for me, I'm going to try just to escalate locally. I'm going to try to just get administrative access to the system that I already have access to. And a great tool for that is Veil PowerUp. These Veil guys, they're awesome. They write the greatest scripts. So PowerUp is another one that you can run that will check anything on the local workstation for a method of privilege escalation. So things like unquoted service paths, or if you have always allow or always install elevated in the registry, it'll find those things and say, hey, you could escalate to admin using this one thing. But it's another tool that can be used by any organization to just like check your baseline image, your baseline Windows deployment install that you're going to push out to your network. Just run it against that and say, just make sure that you're not pushing out devices that have privilege escalation vulnerabilities. So just kind of a summary of the 10 things I've talked about. And then I'm going to talk about a few other things. Missing patches. Everyone knows patch your systems. And then these other things are more along the lines of manually finding them, like group policy preference passwords. That's something that I see all the time. And it usually leads to local admin, widespread local administrator accounts. If you have the same local admin account across all your entire environment, that's a bad thing. If you have weak password policy, we're going to password spray your users. Everyone should be trying that. Overprivileged users on their own workstation. So if you already give admin, that's a bad thing. If you have same thing on other hosts, if you had somebody that accidentally added domain users to a group that is an administrative user of another system. And then looking out to the network for things that employees just leave out there, like sensitive data on shares, sensitive data on SharePoint. I mean, if I'm an attacker, yeah, I could spend all day trying to find, a 0 day to get into whatever database and just try to steal information there. But if I can just go search your network, if I can find the share where your employees are dumping all your PCI data, all your PHI data, that's what I'm going to do. It's the easy way to gain access to that stuff. And then, NetBIOS LLMR poisoning, pretty easy to turn off. And then local workstation privilege escalation. So now to prep your pen test bug out bag. So tuner detection devices. Listen for the types of things that an attacker is going to do on your network by trying pen tester activities against it. Try, port scanning your network. Try password spraying. If you're not seeing, or if you're not being alerted on the 30,000 failed login attempts, then that's something that you should try to put in place. Interpreter shells. Just check to see if you can detect somebody that's connecting out of your network with just a standard interpreter shell. Perform egress filtering. We try to recommend blocking all outbound access for normal users, for normal workstations, for servers. I mean, there's no reason they need to just connect directly out. Let's just set up a web proxy, an authenticated web proxy, so that if somebody needs the internet, they have to go through the web proxy, and you're going to be able to filter there, as opposed to an attacker just being able to, pop a shell and then just go directly out to the internet, straight through the firewall. We're going to kind of miss things. And then things that make our job hard. Things that make us just want to flip a table. Generally, application whitelisting is one of those things, but not always the case. And the reason why is if you haven't disabled PowerShell with application whitelisting, then what's the use? I've actually implemented application whitelisting in one of the companies I worked for, and it's something that, if it's managed correctly, can block so many things, and it can help an organization so much. But it's really tough to implement. It's one of those things that takes manpower, takes hours to say, oh, I want these DLLs to run, I want this XE to be able to run, but if you are missing PowerShell, that's a bad day. And I say disabling PowerShell. People are like, well, how the hell am I going to do anything on my network without PowerShell? Like, I manage my network with PowerShell. You can just specify in the security properties for the XE itself. It's really easy. Just go into the XE and say, hey, I want this PowerShell.exe to only be able to be ran by my domain admins or whatever group that you use to manage your network with PowerShell. NAC, network access control, not being able to just walk up and plug into a port, that's very important. Network segmentation, stopping me from just talking to other hosts on your network is very important. If I can't pivot around, I'm not going to escalate. It's going to be very, very hard to escalate. It's going to make me flip a table. And then fixing any of the things that I've talked about earlier, that is going to just make me work so freaking hard. I mean, I'm going to love it because I'm going to be just banging my head against the desk. But I'm going to be learning something. I'm going to be trying harder, and you as a customer is going to gain so much more value out of your pen test. It's not going to be, oh, they started the pen test, they got GPP, they got local admin, they got domain admin, and got access to sensitive data within 4 hours. And then the test is done. It's going to be more like this tester, or this, like from my own mindset, I'm going to be banging my head against the desk and thinking, well, this is really pissing me off. I'm going to work really freaking hard. I'm going to probably spend hours and hours trying to find something. And it's going to be much more thorough, as opposed to just, just gaining access to what we need and then just taking it. So some things not to do during a pen test. Don't tell people. Don't tell your IR team to just watch the day of the pen test. Like, hey guys, guess what? We're going to have a pen test today. Okay, it's on. We got him. We got him, guys. We got him. He's right there. He's pivoting around. We're going to watch him. We're going to block him. We're going to kill all his access. Don't do that. Just, if you have to tell your teams, say something like, we might have a pen test within the next, 4 months sometime. But don't just tell them the day it's going to happen. Don't enforce different policies on the pen tester. So if you give local admin to all your normal users, just give local admin to the pen tester. If you completely restrict every user on your network, you completely, air gap them. Do that. But I hope you don't air gap me on a pen test, because that's going to be tough. Don't alert users to an upcoming phishing test. You know, if you're gonna pay us to come and do a phishing test against your environment, don't send an email out to all your users and say, hey guys, don't click anything today because you're gonna be in trouble and you're probably gonna be fired. That's just a bad test. So I talked about a lot of things today, and so I decided to kind of throw all these things into this PDF. It's just a guide. It's a Pentest prep guide that I hope will help organizations. It's just the 10 things I talked about today that kind of details things that I think are easily enough fixed that an organization should be looking for them themselves before a pen test. And it's also, it details you know, the 10 issues, like I said, and it also details how to identify them. So we talked about like using different tools like PowerView. We talked about using Windows command line to, you know, password spray our users. I kind of include a lot of the techniques that I use in this little document, and also some tips on how to remediate some of these easier issues to find. And it has a checklist. So what pen testing, or what doomsday prep talk wouldn't be complete without a checklist? And so, I mean, if you want to go check it out, I mean, this is the link. And I'll leave it up there. It's just on my website. But basically, I really hope that not only, you know, organizations kind of gain something from what I'm trying to say today. I mean, it's really, really often that one of these things will lead to complete compromise in an organization, in my experience. And a lot of the other you know, members of my own organization follow a lot of these same tactics. And it's been pretty easy just to escalate. But I also hope that, you know, maybe if there's any pen testers in the audience, that they might gain something out of this talk too. So with that, if there's any questions. Yes? Sorry. Mm-hmm.
They're actually injecting malware onto thousands of organizations and let them connect to
Yep.
instead of they scanning manually. So I expected to see in one of your top 10 common issues the lack of malware protection or poor user habits that either they download their bad attachments, email, or bad websites. I didn't see that in the list of common issues. Have you put it in a
Yeah, no, that's what he's basically saying is like one of the top things, one of the top ways that an organization is compromised is through downloading malware from other sites, downloading malware from the internet. And why wasn't that one of the things? I mean, realistically, it's not like a pen testing thing unless we're doing a command and control test to go download malware. We do that. We do command and control testing where we'll try to just email or, you know, download with a web client every different type of payload we could even imagine. Like, you know, we'll try just doing like basic interpreter payloads. We'll try, you know, injecting interpreter into memory with PowerShell. Try downloading, you know, just common things like DNSCat. We do a lot of those tests, but I think I probably should have prefaced this entire talk with, this is really more of like a network-based pen test approach to some of the vulnerabilities I see. I mean, I didn't cover physical. I didn't cover wireless. I didn't cover just, you know, getting malware from the internet, but I mean, absolutely, that's one of the most prevalent things is phishing attacks and downloading malware from the internet. Yes?
Let's say you, as a pen tester, you hit the one company that is locked down by Fortnite, and you completely fail at compromising the system. How do you present that to them?
Great question. So the question was, if you just get in an organization, or if you're testing an organization and you just can't do anything, if you're just having you know, the toughest time, they're just locked down, how do you present that type of information to the customer? Well, we try all these things. We document, we screenshot every single thing we're doing. That way, you know, when we present it to an organization, they have a report that says, oh, these guys actually tried to look in group policy preference files for passwords. They tried to password spray. You know, they tried every technique they could. They spent hours and hours trying to just compromise the environment. And we give them kudos, you know. We say, guys, you totally destroyed us on this one. It's awesome. Great job, you know. So does that answer it? Yeah. Cool. once or twice it's been close. Any other questions?
Do you believe in kind of constant red teaming or constant pen testing as something organizations ought to look at?
So the question is, do I believe in constant pen testing or constant red teaming? In larger organizations, I would say yes. I think, when you have thousands and thousands of devices on your network, it's one of those things where you want to constantly look for things out on shares. You want to password spray your users because you're having new users come online every day. They're going to pick a bad password. So in general, I would say yes. But I would put vulnerability assessment above that. So if you truly want to secure global network, your entire network, I would say vulnerability management should probably be above that. But if you have the resources to pen test all day, every day, absolutely. Yes.
See a lot of your pen test all revolve around using PowerShell and PowerShell techniques a lot for the pen testing. Are you noticing a trend of more stuff in the wild, like the actual bad guys, like the red teams, using more PowerShell these days?
Well, so the question is, do I see PowerShell in the wild as bad guys using it? Well, personally, I don't see that stuff at all because I'm just doing offensive stuff. But I would imagine they're using it. I would, from what I've heard, a lot of the advanced attackers are, you're using custom malware a lot, but I would imagine once they gain access to a network, they're using the same tactics we're using just because it's stuff that's already built into Windows. It's stuff that's built into networks. It's tools that are there for attackers to just utilize. There's no reason to just start dropping binary malware on a system anymore. We can just use the tools that are built in. Any other questions? Yep. No. Yeah, so red teaming, I think more along the lines of somebody who is going to try and do some of the darkest stuff you could possibly imagine to gain access to what they want. So if it takes, let's talk about physical. Physical is a great description of the difference between red teaming and pen testing. So pen testing, I imagine, walking up and being Adrian Crenshaw and lockpicking and not necessarily just taking a crowbar to a window, Because, I guess if you really wanted to break into a secure facility, what's the easiest way to get in is probably break a window or, get in through the roof. Well, yeah, So yeah, that's what I would kind of describe the difference between the two.
Yeah, typically red teams emulate a specific adversary, right? Whereas you may not be doing that in your pen testing. Right. So that's the way I've known it.
Gotcha. Okay.
So you may be pen testing, but you could also be red teaming as an insider at certain levels of proficiency.
Yep.
So you say, hey, let's just take a basic admin. What could they do as an insider on my
Exactly. Yeah.
On
It's more role based. Yeah.
A more sophisticated person.
Absolutely.
What they do.
Yep.
So you're picking a specific level of adversary.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? One more. What's that? So the question is, where are we based out of? My boss lives in the mines of South Dakota. He's been trying to get me to move up there, but the majority of us are just kind of spread out everywhere. We're all over the place. That's technically where we're based out of, though, South Dakota. Yeah, I'm from Lakeland. So, I guess that's. Any more questions or? What's that? Oh, the link. Well, if that's it, then that's all my talk.